If your own family disrespects you, you feel it in your gut. They talk over you, they belittle your choices, they laugh when you try to speak your truth. And worst of all, they treat outsiders better than they treat you. It hurts because it's not coming from strangers. It's coming from the people who were supposed to protect you, love you, and support you. But here's the hard truth. You will never get respect by waiting for it. You will never be valued by constantly trying to prove yourself. The moment you stop begging for their approval and start walking in your own power, everything changes. You won't just earn their respect, you'll command it. By the way, if you enjoy deep, thought-provoking insights on stoicism, self-improvement, and navigating life with wisdom, you'll love my free newsletter. Every Sunday, I share powerful lessons, controversial truths, and practical strategies to help you level up, all for free. Want to join? Sign up using the link below and start receiving value-packed content straight to your inbox every week. And if you're a brand looking to sponsor my content and reach a highly engaged audience, feel free to reach out via my email in the description. Let's create something impactful together. 1. Don't try to change them. Upgrade yourself. I used to think if I just tried harder, they'd finally respect me. If I got better grades, if I was more helpful, more polite, more available, they'd notice me. I told myself, they're just stressed. They don't mean it. Maybe if I do more, they'll treat me better. So I tried. God, I tried. I suppressed my voice. I swallowed my opinions at family dinners just to avoid being mocked. I kept saying yes to things I didn't want to do, just to be accepted. I let them joke about my dreams, dismiss my ideas, and act like my goals were ridiculous. And every time I thought I was finally earning their respect, they'd move the goalpost. Nothing was ever enough. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the problem. They just weren't capable of seeing me. Some people are so locked into their own mindset, they can't see growth because they've never done it themselves. Some family members hate when you evolve, because your growth reminds them of everything they never became. So they downplay it, they laugh at it, they ignore it. Not because you're small, but because they feel small around you. That was a hard pill to swallow, but it changed everything. One day I stopped trying to prove anything. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped giving them a front row seat to my life. And I stopped trying to shrink myself just to make them comfortable. Instead, I started upgrading me. I went quiet, but not passive. I went inward. I hit the gym. I dove into books. I cut off the noise and worked on my finances, my mindset, my confidence. I stopped showing up to places where I was only tolerated. I stopped texting people who only reached out when they needed something. And I built a life that didn't need their applause. Months passed, then years. The same people who used to mock me, now they speak differently. They ask questions. They observe. They don't laugh like they used to. Why? Because I outgrew the role they assigned me. They could no longer put me in that little box they were so comfortable keeping me in. And here's the deeper truth. You will never be respected by people you're constantly trying to please. Because when you seek their validation, you give them control. They decide your worth. They decide when you've done enough. And usually, the bar is so high you'll die trying to reach it. But when you upgrade yourself and stop needing their approval, something magical happens. You become undeniable. They may still not like you, but they can't ignore you. And that's more powerful than trying to change them. Because truthfully, you can't. You can't heal someone who doesn't even know they're broken. You can't get love from someone who hasn't even learned to love themselves. And You sure as hell can't earn respect from people who never respected themselves in the first place. So stop knocking on locked doors. Build your own house. Let them hear the hammer and the silence. Let your success be the echo they can't escape. Let your peace irritate the hell out of their chaos. And most of all, realize this. You're not doing it to prove them wrong. You're doing it to prove yourself right. You don't need them to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself long enough to become someone they can no longer overlook. That's when the shift happens. Not when they change, but when you do. Because the day you stop chasing respect and start walking like you already have it, is the day the world, even your own family, finally starts watching in silence. 2. Master emotional detachment. There was a time in my life when one careless comment from a family member could ruin an entire week. It didn't have to be a loud insult. Often it was subtle, like a snide smile when I shared my goals, or a mocking glance when I spoke with enthusiasm, or worse, complete silence, the kind of silence that screams louder than words. We don't take you seriously. I used to carry those moments like stones in my chest, replay them, obsess over them, craft better comebacks I'd never get to say. And I'd wonder why I always felt so drained after being around them. It wasn't because they had power, it was because I kept handing it to them. You see, every time we emotionally react, snap back, get flustered, storm off, shut down, we're telling them, you still have access to my peace, and that's exactly what they feed on. I'll never forget the moment I realized this. We were at a family dinner, one of those big gatherings where everyone's pretending to be polite while sizing each other up. One of my relatives leaned in with that familiar fake smile and asked, "So what are you doing these days? Still playing around with that little side project of yours?" In the past, I would have defended myself. I would have listed everything I was working on. I would have tried to prove my worth, as if their respect was something I needed to earn. But that day, I didn't. I looked them straight in the eye. I smiled, and I calmly said, "Still building. You'll see." Then I turned and asked someone else how their week was. That moment changed my life, because I realized that emotional detachment is the most underestimated superpower you can develop, especially in a disrespectful environment. It's not about being cold, it's not about pretending not to care, it's about owning your emotions so deeply that no one else gets to pull the strings. When you're emotionally detached, you don't argue to prove yourself, you don't shrink to be accepted, you don't explode when they try to poke your ego. Instead, you stay calm, confident, and clear. You realize their words say more about them than they ever did about you. They think you're weak because you're quiet? Let them. They think you're lost because you're on your own path? Let them. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them a performance. You owe yourself peace. And peace comes when you learn to stop over-personalizing other people's projections. Because most disrespectful family members aren't really talking to you. They're talking to a version of themselves they've never healed. Their insecurity, their regret, their own unfulfilled life, it spills out in the form of sarcasm, superiority, and fake concern. When you react, you validate it. When you stay composed, you expose it. But mastering emotional detachment isn't just about one good comeback or walking away from a dinner table with your head held high. It's a daily practice. It's choosing every morning to carry yourself, not the weight of their expectations. It's learning that your peace is not up for negotiation. It's reminding yourself that respect doesn't come from pleasing others, but from honoring yourself, even when no one else will. And slowly, something beautiful happens. The chaos no longer gets inside you. You start showing up to family gatherings differently, not bitter, not guarded, but untouchable, because you know who you are, you know what you stand for, and you know that no amount of disrespect can reach someone who's mastered the art of staying grounded in their own worth. So let them roll their eyes, let them whisper, let them misunderstand. Your peace is not a toy, your energy is not a charity, your emotions are not a playground, and once you learn to protect them, you don't just earn respect, you command it. 3. Don't fight for the spotlight. Build your own stage. There's something soul-crushing about trying to earn respect in a room where you're constantly ignored, especially when that room is filled with people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, your own family. I remember standing in my childhood living room one Christmas. We were all gathered, cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone, and one cousin who had just landed a corporate job was being celebrated like he'd solved world hunger. Applause, hugs, admiration. I had just finished my first major creative project. I was proud of it. I had poured months of effort, late nights and sacrifice into it. So when someone asked, "What are you up to these days?" I smiled and shared my progress. Crickets. Someone changed the subject. Another person walked out to get more wine, and just like that, my moment was erased. That night I stared at the ceiling for hours. A question burned in my mind. Why does my family only respect certain kinds of success? Why do I always feel like I'm performing for their approval and failing? It hit me then. I had been waiting for them to hand me the spotlight, to say, "We're proud of you," to finally notice me. But I realized something far more powerful. The people who never gave you the spotlight were never meant to control your light. You don't need a seat at their table. You don't need a round of applause from people who don't understand your journey. And you definitely don't need to beg for space in a room that was never built to celebrate you. So I stopped fighting for the spotlight, and I started building my own stage. That meant going all in on what I loved, whether they understood it or not. It meant taking myself seriously, even when they didn't. It meant creating, improving, evolving, not to prove anything to them, but to build something that would outgrow their limited vision of who I was. And the most ironic thing, when I stopped trying to impress them, they started watching, not clapping, not cheering, just watching, from a distance. And that's when I knew I had shifted the dynamic. Because when you stop performing for a place in their spotlight and start building your own, you become impossible to ignore. Here's the truth. Your family might not see your value right now. That's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of their expectations, their conditioning, their inability to see beyond traditional forms of success. They're used to the safe path. They cheer for titles and trophies. So when you show up with vision, passion and dreams that don't come with a degree or a salary, they get uncomfortable. Let them. Because you weren't born to blend in with their expectations. You were born to create your own path, your own platform, your own stage, one brick at a time. And you don't build it with validation. You build it with discipline, with sleepless nights, silent progress, and a fire so steady they can't blow it out with doubt. Eventually, your stage will shine so bright that even those who overlooked you will have no choice but to acknowledge it. But by then, you won't care for their applause, because you'll have built something greater than respect. You'll have built freedom, the freedom to speak without shrinking, the freedom to walk into any room knowing your worth isn't tied to who claps, the freedom to never chase approval again. So stop fighting for the spotlight. Let others play that game. You build something so undeniable that the light finds you, and when it does, don't use it to throw shade. Use it to illuminate the path for others who feel like they're stuck in the same shadows you once stood in. That's real power. That's legacy. That's how you win. 4. Set boundaries and actually enforce them. There's a silent prison many people live in, and it's built with the bricks of family guilt and the fear of being disrespectful. You're told to tolerate things that drain you, to keep the peace, to be the bigger person. And before you realize it, you've become a doormat in your own story, always available, never respected. I used to think setting boundaries meant confrontation, drama, chaos, losing love. But what I didn't understand back then was this. Boundaries don't ruin relationships. They reveal who's really there for you. I remember the day I decided to stop answering every call from a particular family member. This person would call me only to gossip, criticize, or subtly belittle my choices. Every conversation left me feeling smaller, less than, unworthy, but I kept picking up, because that's what family does, right? Wrong. One afternoon, I stared at my phone as it rang. Same name, same energy. And for the first time, I didn't answer. I turned my phone over, sat back, and took a deep breath. That silence was terrifying, and then it was freeing. That moment became the beginning of a powerful lesson. A boundary only works if you're willing to enforce it, even when it's uncomfortable. Anyone can say, "I don't like being talked to that way." But when they cross the line again, and you let it slide, that's not a boundary. That's a suggestion. And suggestions don't change dynamics. They reinforce them. Setting boundaries means saying, "I won't be attending that gathering if it means being insulted under the guise of jokes." I don't accept unannounced visits. I value my space. If you raise your voice at me, I will end the conversation. And then you follow through. The first time you enforce a boundary, it will shake things up. People will say, "You've changed," that you're cold, that you're disrespectful. Good. Let them say what they want, because those same people never complained when they crossed the line. It's easy to be labeled difficult when you stop being easy to manipulate. And here's the raw truth most people won't tell you. The people who get most offended by your boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. That's why enforcing them feels so scary, because it will trigger resistance. But what's the alternative? Living a life where you're constantly drained, undervalued, and invisible in your own home? No, thank you. I've learned that enforcing boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about protecting your peace. It's not about becoming aggressive. It's about becoming assertive, clear, calm, unshakable. And slowly, something amazing happens. The people who genuinely love and respect you will adapt. They'll rise to meet the standard you've set. And those who don't, they'll distance themselves, which honestly is just them doing the emotional labor for you. Boundaries also train you to value your time, your energy, your presence. You stop showing up to every argument you're invited to. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop negotiating your self-worth in rooms where no one is listening. You start living with clarity, not guilt. And let me tell you, that's when real power begins. Because respect doesn't start with other people. It starts with the lines you draw around your peace and your willingness to defend them. So stop feeling guilty for protecting your energy. Stop apologizing for needing space. Stop explaining boundaries to people who aren't listening. Just enforce them. Not with rage, not with resentment, with calm, grounded action. Because you don't have to raise your voice to stand tall. You don't have to cut people off to reclaim your dignity. You just need to be clear about the price of access to you. And when people see you respect yourself, they'll either match it or leave. Both outcomes, peaceful. 5. Don't over-explain yourself. There's a certain exhaustion that comes from constantly having to justify your every move, especially to people who don't even try to understand you. You make a life choice, they question it. You say no, they demand a reason. You pursue a dream, they tell you to be realistic. And suddenly, your life becomes a courtroom, where you are always the defendant, and they are the judge, the jury, and the critic in the back row smirking. I've been there. Every decision I made, whether it was declining a family gathering to work on my goals or cutting off toxic communication, came with a follow-up interrogation. Why are you being distant? You think you're better than us now? What do you mean you're doing that with your life? And I used to answer, over and over again, because I thought if I explained myself clearly enough, if I gave them context, backstory, logic, reasons, vulnerability, they'd finally understand. They didn't. In fact, the more I explained, the less I was respected. Why? Because over-explaining is often a disguised plea for validation. It says, please understand me so I can feel worthy again. And if the person you're explaining yourself to doesn't respect you to begin with, you've already lost the battle. I remember the moment it finally hit me. A family member asked, why would you walk away from such a stable opportunity just to chase something so risky? I opened my mouth to explain. Then I stopped, not out of rudeness, but out of clarity. I realized this person isn't actually interested in understanding me. They're interested in keeping me where they feel comfortable, and no amount of explaining would shift that. So I smiled and said, it's what feels right to me. And that was it. No speech, no justification, no debate. And guess what? They didn't understand, but they did start backing off. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you stop feeding the illusion that others have the right to approve your life. Here's the truth. People don't need to understand your boundaries to respect them. They just need to know they're non-negotiable. Over-explaining is often rooted in trauma, in the desperate need to be liked, accepted, or understood. But that behavior costs you something sacred: your peace. You start wasting your breath on people who've already made up their mind about you. You start overthinking every word. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you should have said more. You shouldn't have, because the people who truly love you don't need an essay to respect your no. They don't need a TED Talk to support your dreams. They don't demand that you sacrifice your authenticity to keep them comfortable. They just see you, and that's enough. So here's your reminder. You don't owe anyone a speech when you say no. You don't need to explain why you're choosing peace over chaos. You don't need to break down your past trauma for someone who only wants gossip, not healing. The more confident you become in your path, the quieter your explanations become. It's not arrogance, it's self-respect. Because when you finally realize that your life is not a democracy, that your inner peace is not up for vote, something shifts. You stop defending every move. You stop talking people into respecting you. You stop trading your voice for approval. Instead, you speak once, with clarity, with calm. And if they don't get it, you let them live in their confusion. It's not your job to drag someone toward your level of awareness. Your only job is to honor your truth and let your silence do the talking. Because the most powerful people don't shout, they just move differently. And that quiet confidence, it's louder than any explanation you could ever give. So next time you feel tempted to explain yourself, don't. Take a breath, stand tall, and simply say, this is what I'm choosing. And that's enough. And then watch who respects you more, and who disappears. Either way, you win. 6. Stop oversharing with people who undervalue you. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from being rejected. They come from being known and then disregarded. Have you ever opened up to someone, poured your soul out, and then felt smaller afterward? Maybe it was a family member, someone you thought would understand. So you shared your struggles, your dreams, your fears, and they met you with silence, or worse, sarcasm. They made you feel foolish for feeling, weak for being honest, dramatic for needing connection. That's not just painful, it's violating. Because when you overshare with people who don't value you, you're handing sacred pieces of yourself to someone who sees them as disposable. I used to be an open book, especially with family, because that's what we're taught, right? Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. Talk to your loved ones. They care. But here's a brutal truth I had to learn the hard way. Not everyone who shares your blood deserves access to your inner world. Oversharing isn't vulnerability, not when it's one-sided, not when it's desperate, not when it's based on the hope that maybe this time they'll finally see you. I remember once sharing a really personal story with a relative, something that had haunted me for years. I was vulnerable, raw, open. I thought I was being brave. And you know what they said? "You think your life is hard? You should hear what I've been through." Just like that, my pain became a competition. My honesty became an inconvenience. I walked away from that moment with a valuable lesson. Oversharing is self-betrayal when it's done in the wrong rooms. We often overshare because we're seeking closeness. We want to be seen, validated, understood. But when you share the depths of your soul with people who haven't earned your trust, you're essentially handing ammunition to someone who doesn't know how to handle a weapon. And often, they'll use it, not against your back, but to your face. "Oh, you're so sensitive. You always make things about you. No wonder no one wants to be around you." Suddenly, your truth becomes their entertainment. So here's the shift. Start treating your inner life like a locked vault, not a public bulletin board. Not everyone deserves access to your dreams. Not everyone deserves to know what keeps you up at night. Not everyone has the emotional maturity to hold what you're carrying. And that's not your fault. The problem isn't being vulnerable. Vulnerability is powerful. The problem is who you're being vulnerable with. You must learn to discern before you disclose. Ask yourself, has this person ever used my words against me? Do I feel drained or lighter after sharing with them? Do they listen or do they wait to talk? Do they hold space or do they judge? If someone constantly invalidates your feelings, dismisses your experiences, or gossips about your story to others, you owe them nothing. Not your memories, not your explanations, not your pain. In fact, silence can be one of the most sacred forms of self-respect. I've found that the more I protect my emotional space, the more peaceful my mind becomes. The less I share with people who don't get me, the more I hear my own voice. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need to convince people of your worth. And you definitely don't need to expose your soul just to feel seen. True intimacy isn't loud, it's quiet, it's safe, it's mutual. So if you've been feeling unseen, unheard, or disrespected, take a step back. Ask yourself, am I giving too much of myself to people who give me crumbs in return? If the answer is yes, it's time to retreat. Not in fear, not in anger, but in power. Because your truth is sacred, and not everyone is holy enough to hear it. 7. Create distance without guilt. One of the hardest things to do, especially with family, is to choose space over obligation. You start to feel like you're doing something wrong for wanting peace. That if you step back, you're betraying the people who raised you, supported you, or share your blood. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. Being related doesn't give anyone the right to drain you. I used to feel guilty for not picking up the phone, for skipping toxic family gatherings, for saying no without an explanation. But over time I realized the only thing I was betraying was myself. Creating distance doesn't mean you hate them. It means you've chosen to protect your peace. Some people are better loved from afar, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I stopped over-justifying. I stopped forcing connections that hurt. And guess what? My mind became quieter. My chest stopped feeling heavy. I finally started to feel free. You don't need a dramatic excuse to walk away. Sometimes the way they make you feel is enough. If someone constantly disrespects your boundaries, makes you feel small, or brings negativity into your life, you have every right to create space. Let go of the guilt. You're not being cold. You're finally choosing yourself. If your family disrespects you, mocks your dreams, invalidates your feelings, or treats you like you're lesser, remember this. You don't have to fight, argue, or beg for basic respect. Respect that has to be demanded is already broken. You don't owe your pain to tradition. You don't owe your silence to avoid conflict. You don't owe your identity to people who only love the version of you they can control. You are not too sensitive. You are not the problem. You are not selfish for wanting peace. You're healing. You're growing into a version of yourself that no longer fits in the box they tried to keep you in. And yes, it's uncomfortable. You'll feel guilty. You'll question your decisions. You might even feel lonely. But that pain is not punishment. It's the price of transformation. The moment you stop chasing approval and start respecting yourself, everything changes. You speak with more conviction. You move with more purpose. You radiate the kind of confidence that demands respect. Without saying a word, let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them go. Because at the end of the day, the people meant for you will never need to be convinced to treat you with dignity. So walk your path, not for revenge, not to prove a point, but because you finally understand your worth. And once you do, you'll never let anyone, not even family, treat you like you're less than whole again.